I was supposed to talk about how we at the DOAJ identify ethical publishing, or as we prefer to say, good publishing practice and transparent publishing practice. Before I go into detail, just 1 minute as to where I come from. You can see from my short bio, I come from the library angle. I'm not a librarian myself, but I've been in leading positions at the Technical University of Denmark and Lund University. In the 19th, it was the Technical University of Denmark, and late 19th, I actually liaised a lot with Jan Veltrup and his team at Academic Press to make the first e-only agreements, what was later called the big deals. And it was fantastic to be able to offer users a lot more content in much easier and convenient ways. And later on, when I moved to Lund University in year 2000, we continued, of course, this journey, and again, massive explosion in content, easy accessible for the users. Gradually, I experienced then that people from the spin-off companies from Lund University knocked at my door and said, oh, now I'm out of the university and I cannot access the stuff that is necessary for me, that I need to do my innovation. And then I began to think about this whole access problem, and we had conferences at Lund University. 2002, we had a Nordic conference in scholarly communication, and there was one from the audience that said, yeah, we need a list of open access journals. And remember, this is 13 years ago, very early days. So that was basically the start of what became the Directory of Open Access Journals. Since then, I have been very occupied with the concept of access and the benefits of open access and open scholarship to not only users in universities, researchers and students, but on a global scale, because the spin-off companies have their problems, but as you know, we have universities in Africa who have not a single subscription to a journal. How can they do research? So it became very much in focus on my attention, and I have worked on open access advocacy for a number of years now, as well for Spark Europe, and was one of the founders of OASPA. Of course, we have seen that publishers in the beginning very reluctant and skeptic about open access. Yeah, open access publishers publish rubbish was the early messages even from STM. Now, STM has embraced open access. Some of my colleagues would say they have suffocated open access, but I'll leave that. For me, it's not really the issue. The problem is that the academy, the scholarly community, has not really made up their minds. On the one hand, you have hundreds of open access policies, 100 funder mandates. On the other hand, those same institutions are rewarding often behavior that runs contrary to what they say they want to see. So when I'm at library conferences and talking to university managers, major parts of the time in discussions are about the publishers. And as we all know, when you point one finger in one direction, there are 4 fingers who are pointing to yourself. So I'm increasingly annoyed with the fact that the academy doesn't really take responsibility for these issues. So that was my sort of introductory statement. We established, as I said, the directory 13 years ago, 12 years ago. And what happens now? That was it. And of course, the basic demand then was simply a list of open access journals journals that did not charge their readers for access and allowed them to print and download and all this. And during the years, this has gradually, the service DOAJ has gradually developed into the authoritative go-to point for peer-reviewed scholarly journals, not based on the subscription model. As we all know, the majority of open access journals actually are not based on APCs, but the majority of open access articles published are based on APCs because of the relative weight of various business models. And in the recent years, we have increasingly been focusing on good and transparent publishing practice. There are many stakeholders around the things we are doing. Of course, authors and their advisors, often librarians or colleagues, they want tools to choose proper open access publishing channels. Funders and institutions want tools where they can determine which publishing channels comply with their requirements, and more funders are issuing requirements. And managers of open access publication funds want as well tools where they can select the eligible publishing channels for supporting APC payments. And we have increasingly scholarly communication researchers turning to us to get data to do research in this area. And of course, not least the publishers. We can see that, believe it or not, many publishers consider listing in the DOAJ as a kind of certification or prestige, mostly, of course, journals coming from other areas than Western Europe and North America. But this about eligibility for support from open access publication funds are important, and in general, increased visibility traffic, more submissions, and better promotion is important as well. And we are primarily dealing with journals, not with publishers, because we are dealing only with open access journals, and of course with open access only publishers, that is the same issue, but all publishers today now have pure or fully open access journals. So we deal with journals primarily. That is not to say that if we, and I'll come back to that if we detect what I will call publishing malpractice in our service, we can delete all journals from a specific publisher, and we have done that several times actually, because we do a very detailed investigation. So we are serving many stakeholders nowadays, which means that our criteria, our application form has become very complex. Of course, we are not only dealing with the issues around publication ethics, we have to provide basic information as well, and as well what we call information about the technical quality of the journal, licensing issues, rights issues, dissemination issues, and so forth. So it has developed into a long list of criteria. And as a special thing, we have what we call the DOAJ seal. We are not into ranking, but we would like to promote what we call best publishing practice, and I'll come back to that. So, as I said, initially it was a very sort of primitive criteria, 2 or 6 questions, I think it was. But as I indicated, the demand has grown over time as to the information that the various stakeholders would like to be able to see or extract about journals. So actually more than 2 years ago, before sort of the whole predatory thing really took off, we began to redraft our criteria, and we looked around in the community, what can we use, and is there anything we can build on? So we discovered that others were trying to do the same thing. We entered discussions with COPE and OASPA and WAME, and together we drafted the principles of transparency and best practice in scholarly publishing. And of course, this is not restricted to open access publishing. You can see them on the DOAJ side, it's on the COPE side as well, and OASPA. And these are, this is from our website, these are the 16 areas where we agreed that these were the major issues. In the DOAJ criteria, I have highlighted the principles here that we have included in our inclusion criteria. The ones in gray we have found difficult to, either not that important or difficult to operationalize in a questionnaire. For instance, identification of and dealing with allegations of research misconduct. We have found it difficult. It's not because it's not important, but these are the things that we focus on, among many other things, but from these principles, it's the 10 of the 16. So this is our application form. It's online, and publishers are nowadays requested to answer 54 questions to be able to submit an application. We can already see 1.5 years after we have changed to a new criteria that it is it's quite a job to actually be able to submit an application. So that alone, someone is nodding here, but it already that filters a lot of questionable publishers from actually doing an application. We drafted these, as I mentioned, 2 years ago. We worked with COPE and WASPA, and I think our early draft was inspiring this discussion, and we have discussed it with our advisory board, where publishers and library representatives are on the board. And it is a compromise because you could even have had more and even tougher criteria, but it's important here to say that we are global, and we want really to see and to support a global science enterprise. So it's a compromise, and we are already working on the next update because things are changing along the way. For instance, I could imagine that in the next revision, we would ask for publishers to state whether they have data policies, and there are other such things that are becoming more important. So among those many questions, these are the must-have. 5 minutes. Sorry? 5 minutes. Oh, Jesus, yeah. An open access statement, comply with the Budapest definition, peer review process, and they should tell us what kind of peer review process. Editorial board will clearly identifiable members, and I can tell you here we are actually requiring journals to give us at least 5 identifiable editors, and when we, via our various means, are smelling something not that good here, we actually contact those 5, and frequently we discover that this academic in question say, oh, I didn't know I was on that editorial board. So that is just one of the things that we check and a means to identify publishing malpractice. And of course, licensing and copyright information, aims and scope, and the journal should actually publish before they can be considered. And then there's a lot of other things that we ask journals to tell us, to inform us about, but it's not sort of criteria that will exclude, but this is the kind of information that is important for various stakeholders. For instance, does the journal have an archiving arrangement? And if so, by which organization and so forth? So there's a lot of stuff there, and more here, actually. And all this stuff, when the journal has passed this application, it will be published and computable, which means that you can search for journals with specific features. A little bit about the editorial part of it, which is the most important in this context. As I indicated, we are going very detailed on the editorial processes and about the peer review. What we require the journal not only to answer the question, but as well provide us with a specific URL where we can find that information. So we check it actually. And that accounts for many of the other. Here's the licensing thing, the licenses that are available. We promote CC licenses, of course, but other options are possible as well. Deposit policy and so forth. So we are global and we want to help. We have to respect different publishing cultures and traditions and not primarily exclude, but rather facilitate and assist journals to come into the flow. So these new criteria launched 1.5 years ago means, first of all, that all new applications should pass that one. And during those 18 months, we have received 6,000. We have rejected right away, or more or less right away, 50%. We have accepted 25%, which is 1,500, and 1,500 are in process. This is a huge task. You might say 1,500 in the course of 1.5 years. Are they too inclusive? But remember, in the course of the last couple of years, even the big publishers are launching open access journals in numbers. Not many more than Elsevier knows that they have more than 250 fully open access journals now, for instance. So there's open access journals coming along all the time. And of course, working on a global scale, we have a lot to do to help publishers apply good publishing practices. Many publishers or journals haven't even thought about a fair number of those issues here. And we would like them to be in the flow, and we would like much more exchange or interaction between content published here and in other parts of the world. I think that's a benefit for all parties. And we are actually trying our best to promote standards and transparency and best practice. For instance, such a thing as a DOI, which is a sort of a given thing here in Western Europe and North America. I can tell you less than half of the journals in the DOAJ applies DOI for many reasons. So there's a lot to do to facilitate such things as well. Yeah, we are supported by hundreds of libraries, and you can see our sponsors here. I think we are doing what we can to marginalize questionable publishing, because it has become an annoying problem for many of us. Our approach is not to blacklist, but rather raise the bar and try to provide as much information as possible to enable authors to make good choices as to where they should submit their journal. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Lars.